The morning was cold and gray when Lena Carter walked into the Harrow Combat Training Center with a small bag on her shoulder and a folded paper in her hand. She was not a big girl. She was not a loud girl. She was the kind of person most people looked at once and then looked away from, not because she was ugly or strange, but because she seemed so ordinary. Medium height, thin arms, dark hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. So she wore plain black training clothes that were a little too big for her. She looked like someone who had wandered into the wrong building. She had, in a way. The paper in her hand said, Room 4B. That was where she was supposed to go. She was new to the center, having just transferred from a small training school across the city. Her registration had been handled by a woman named Gloria, who worked the front desk and answered phones at the same time and wrote things down fast and sometimes wrote them wrong. Gloria had meant to place Lena in the Level 1 beginner class. That was the class for people who were just starting out, people who did not yet know how to fall properly, how to block, how to stand. That was where Lena belonged on paper. But Gloria had written 4B instead of 4A. One letter, one small mistake, and that one small mistake was about to change everything. Then Lena found the room without trouble. She pushed open the heavy metal door and stepped inside. The room was large. The floor was covered in thick blue mats. The walls were plain and bare except for a single printed sign that read, No weakness tolerated here. The ceiling lights were bright and humming, and the people already inside the room were nothing like the beginners Lena had expected to find. There were 12 of them. So all men except for one woman who stood near the back wall, stretching her arms above her head like she was preparing for something serious. The men were large. Not all of them were tall, but all of them had the look of people who had trained for years. Their arms were thick, their necks were wide, their faces were calm in the way that dangerous things are calm, not because nothing is happening inside, but because they have learned to keep it hidden. Lena stood near the door and looked around the room. A small line formed between her eyebrows. One of the men near the center of the room noticed her first. His name was Brick. That was not the name his mother gave him, but it was the name everyone used. He was wide across the chest and had a flat, square face. He looked at Lena the way a cat looks at something that has walked into the wrong yard. You lost? He said. His voice was not mean exactly, but it was not kind either. It was the voice of someone who expected the answer to be yes. Room 4B, Lena said, holding up her paper. This is 4B. Brick looked at another man beside him. That man, tall, lean, with a shaved head and a scar above his left eyebrow, looked at Lena too. His name was Torres. He had been training at Harrow for 3 years. He was one of the best fighters in the building. This is the Predator class, Torres said slowly, like he was speaking to someone very young. Fawn, you understand what that means? Lena looked at him. No, she said simply. Torres blinked. Then he almost smiled, but not quite. It means this is the advanced group. Top level. We don't do basics here. I have room 4B on my paper, Lena said again. She was not arguing. She was not being difficult. She was simply stating what she knew. Her voice was quiet and flat and very steady. She did not seem nervous, which was strange, because a person walking into a room full of large and powerful fighters usually shows at least a little nervousness, a faster blink, a tighter jaw. Lena showed none of that. The woman near the back wall had stopped stretching. Her name was Dana. She had short-cropped hair and sharp brown eyes. She studied Lena with a look that was more curious than anything else. Let her stay until the instructor gets here, Dana said. He'll sort it out. Nobody argued with Dana. She had that kind of voice, too. Lena walked to a quiet space near the wall and set her bag down. She did not try to talk to anyone. She did not look at her phone. She just stood there, relaxed, her hands loose at her sides, her eyes moving slowly around the room the way a person's eyes move when they are taking in information without making it obvious. The instructor arrived 4 minutes later. His name was Marcus Reed. He was 41 years old, and he had spent most of those years learning how to hurt people and how to teach other people to hurt people. He had trained under 3 different masters across 2 countries. He had competed in 11 professional circuits and finished in the top 3 in 9 of them. He walked with a slight limp from an old knee injury, but the limp did nothing to make him seem smaller. If anything, it made him seem harder. Act like something that had been broken and then put back together in a way that made it stronger. He came through the door already talking. Warm-up was supposed to start at 7. It is now 7:04. That means 4 of you owe me 20 extra push-ups each. You know who you are. He walked to the center of the mat without looking up. He was carrying a clipboard and scanning it with one finger. Then he looked up. He saw Lena. He stopped walking. It was not a dramatic stop. It was not a stumble or a flinch. It was simply a pause, very brief, the kind of pause a person makes when something does not match what they expected. He looked at her for 2 full seconds. Then he looked down at his clipboard. Then he looked at her again. "Who are you?" he said. "Lena Carter," she said. "I have a paper that says room 4B. Reed looked at his clipboard again. He flipped one page, then another. Then he made a small sound in the back of his throat that was not quite a word. There's no Lena Carter on my list," he said. "I just transferred," she said. "From Meridian School. They sent my registration yesterday." Reed looked at her for another long moment. His face gave nothing away. He had the kind of face that had been trained not to show things. "Stay to the side," he said finally. "I'll make a call after warm-up and figure out where you belong." Lena nodded. She moved to the edge of the mat without complaint. Brick leaned toward Torres and said quietly, "Oh, she'll be gone in 10 minutes. Torres said nothing. He was still watching Lena. There was something about the way she stood, he thought. Something about the way she held herself that he could not quite name. It was not confidence exactly. It was something quieter than that. He could not figure out what it was, and that bothered him more than he wanted to admit. Reed set his clipboard down and rolled his shoulders. "All right," he said. "Let's begin." The warm-up alone was enough to break most people. Reed ran the Predator class through 40 minutes of movement before any real training began. Jumping, rolling, footwork drills across the mat, falling and getting up, over and over, until the body remembered it without the brain having to tell it. Push-ups, burpees, a brutal set of core exercises that made even Torres breathe hard through his nose. Lena did all of it. She did not do it loudly. She did not grunt or groan or make any sound at all. She simply moved from one exercise to the next at the same steady pace, like a machine that had been set to one speed and would not go faster or slower no matter what. Her form was not flashy. It was clean and quiet and exact. She did not waste movement. Every time she dropped for a push-up, her back was flat as a board. Every time she rolled, she came up centered, her weight already shifting forward. The Brick finished his burpees and stood up panting. He glanced at Lena, who was finishing hers without even breathing through her mouth. He looked away, then looked back, then made a small sound like something small and unimportant had just become a little less unimportant. Dana had been watching Lena since the warm-up began. Dana was the kind of person who noticed things. She had been the only woman in the Predator class for 2 years, and she had earned that spot by being smarter than most of the men and more patient than all of them. She watched the way Lena moved and felt something stir in the back of her mind, something like recognition. Reed moved to the center of the mat when warm-up was done. Everyone formed a loose circle around him. Lena stayed at the edge of the group, not pushing in, not hanging back too far either. "Pair drills today," Reed said. "Defense patterns first. I want clean blocks. I want your footwork correct. If your footwork is wrong, the rest doesn't matter." He looked around the group. Brick, you're with Torres. Dana, you take Park. He named 4 more pairs quickly, then his eyes stopped on Lena. There was a pause. Carter, he said, using her last name in the way instructors do when they have decided to treat someone as part of the group, even when they are not sure they should. You're observing today. Stand here. He pointed to a spot on the edge of the mat where she would have a clear view of everything. Lena nodded and walked to the spot without a word. The pairs spread out across the mat and began. The drill was simple in idea but hard in practice. One person attacked with a straight punch. The other blocked and moved. Block and move. Block and move. The point was not to hit hard. The point was to be in the right place at the right moment, every single time. Reed walked between the pairs, watching, correcting, saying short, sharp things that were more useful than long explanations. He was a good teacher. He did not waste words. He saw problems fast and described them in a way that fixed them fast. He passed Lena twice during the drills. The first time he did not look at her. The second time he did, just briefly. She was watching the pairs with total stillness, her dark eyes moving slowly from one set to another. She was not watching the way beginners watched, with wide eyes, following the exciting parts, missing the footwork. She was watching the feet. She was watching the hips. She was watching the space between the two people, how it opened and closed, how it changed. Reed moved on without saying anything, but he had noticed. After 20 minutes of paired drills, Torres made a mistake. It was a small one. His back foot drifted an inch too far out on a block. And then Brick, who was a half-second faster than most people gave him credit for, slipped inside the block and tapped Torres on the side of the head. Not hard, not a real strike, just enough to say, "You would have been hurt there." Torres reset and shook his head once, annoyed at himself. From the edge of the mat, Lena said quietly, "Your weight moved to the outside before the block." Everyone stopped. The room went very still, in the way that rooms go still when something unexpected has been said. Torres turned and looked at her. His expression was not angry. It was something more complicated than that. He was a man who did not like being corrected. He liked it even less from someone he did not know, who was standing on the edge of the mat like a spectator. "What?" he said. Lena was not flustered. She pointed at the general area of his back foot. "When Brick moved, your weight shifted to the outside edge of your back foot before your block came up. That's why the angle was off." Silence. Then Reed said from across the room without turning around, "She's right." Torres looked at Reed. Then he looked at Lena again. Something shifted in his eyes. Not warmth exactly, but the beginning of a recalculation. Brick crossed his arms and looked at Lena more carefully. He was not a stupid man. He was a proud man, which was different. And even pride could not stop him from seeing what was in front of him. "How long you been training?" he asked. "A while," Lena said. "How long is a while?" She looked at him. "Since I was 4. Brick looked at Brick, looked at Torres. Torres looked at the ceiling briefly, in the way people do when they are adjusting something in their head. Dana, for the first time, smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. Reed had moved to the far end of the mat. He had his back to all of them, but anyone watching would have seen that he had stopped writing on his clipboard. He was standing still, listening. "Back to drill," he said, without turning around, and everyone went back. But the room was different now. Not dramatically different, not loudly different, but something had shifted, the way the weight in a room shifts when someone who was invisible a moment ago is suddenly seen. People glanced at Lena when they thought she was not looking, but she was always looking at the mat when they did. At the end of the session, Reed told everyone to cool down and dismissed them. As the group broke apart and people reached for water bottles and towels, he walked to Lena. He stood in front of her for a moment without speaking. This was something he did. He used silence the way other people used questions. Lena waited. "I'll call admin and find out what happened with your paperwork," he said. "Okay," she said. You understand this class is not for beginners." "I understood that when I walked in," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes were the gray-brown color of old stone, and they were very steady. "Come back tomorrow," he said. He turned and walked away before she could answer. She picked up her bag. She did not smile. But something in her face settled, the way a door settles when it finally fits its frame. She walked out into the gray morning. Behind her, Torres was watching the doorway long after she had gone through it. He had the feeling, quiet and persistent, that something had just begun. He did not know what it was yet, but the feeling did not go away. He put on his jacket and decided he would be in class early tomorrow. The next morning, the paperwork was still wrong. Gloria had found the original form and confirmed the mistake. She had gone red in the face and offered to fix it immediately. A spot in the Level 1 beginner class was waiting. All Lena had to do was sign a new form and walk down the hall to room 4A, where people were learning how to fall without hurting themselves. Lena had stood at the front desk for a moment, looking at the new form. Then she had said, politely, that Instructor Reed had told her to come back to room 4B. Gloria had looked uncertain. She called Reed's extension. He picked up on the second ring. There was a short conversation. Gloria had done most of the listening. She had hung up, looked at Lena in a way that was both confused and curious, and said, "He says to let you through." So Lena went back to 4B. When she arrived, the room was already half full. Torres was there, as he had decided the night before. Brick was there, stretching his neck with his eyes closed. Dana was there, doing slow balance work in the corner, one leg raised, her arms wide, her eyes fixed on a point on the wall that only she could see. 3 others were present, too, men whose names Lena had not yet learned. They all noticed when she walked in. Nobody said anything, but the noticing was different from yesterday. Yesterday it was the noticing of confusion. Today it was the noticing of something still being decided. Lena set her bag down in the same spot as before and started stretching. Reed came in at exactly 7. No clipboard today, just him and a look on his face that meant today was different from yesterday. "No pair drills this morning," he said. "Today we do live work." Brick opened one eye. Torres's expression did not change, but something in his posture became more alert. Dana lowered her leg and stood naturally. Live work was real sparring, controlled but not soft. Nobody told you what was coming. You had to read it and respond. It was the closest thing to real without being real. And even in the Predator class, it produced mistakes. Reed looked around the room. "We'll go one at a time. Everyone watches. I want to see how you read and how you respond. Speed matters less than accuracy. I don't care how fast you move if you move to the wrong place." He started with 2 of the men Lena did not know. Their names were Holt and Kim. Holt was a large man with slow feet and fast hands. Kim was the opposite. Fast feet, slower hands, but with a sense of distance that was almost supernatural. They went for 3 minutes. Holt got inside twice. Kim used his footwork to avoid 4 straight attacks. It was good work, not perfect, but good. Reed stopped them, made 4 comments, sent them to the side. Next was Dana and one of the other men. Dana was fluid in a way that looked almost lazy until the moment it didn't. She slipped 2 grabs, redirected a heavy punch into empty space, and put the man off balance twice without using strength. She was smaller than him by a full foot. It did not matter. Then Reed looked at Lena. "Carter." Lena stood up from her spot on the edge. "You've been watching? Let me see something." Reed gestured to the center of the mat. "I'll give you a partner in a moment, but first, I want to see how you stand." Lena walked to the center. She did not know exactly what he meant, but she understood enough. She settled into her stance without thinking about it. weight even. Feet about shoulder width, hands loose, not fisted, not too high and not too low. Her head was straight, but her chin was not tucked too far or lifted too high. Reed walked around her once, slowly, like he was looking at something he was trying to understand. Nobody made a sound. He stopped in front of her. "When did you start training?" he asked. "My father started teaching me when I was 4, she said. He trained me until I was 15. Then I trained with a coach named Song for 3 years. Then I trained alone for 2. There was a short silence. "How old are you now?" Reed asked. 22, she said. 18 years of training. Reed's face did not change, but something behind his eyes moved, very slightly, like a curtain shifting in a room with no wind. He turned to the group. "Brick," he said. "Center." Brick stood up. He was not smiling, which was unusual for him. He was taking this seriously. He walked to the mat and stood across from Lena. He was almost twice her width and half a head taller. And he looked at her and she looked at him, and neither of them looked afraid. 2-minute round, Reed said. Controlled contact. I stop it if something goes wrong. He stepped back. And then something happened that the people in that room would talk about for a long time afterward. Brick moved first. He did not rush. He was smart enough to know that rushing at someone you did not know was a mistake. He moved with measured, tested steps, closing the distance carefully, his hands up, his eyes on Lena's center mass the way he had been trained to look. Lena moved too, but she moved sideways, not backward. She stepped to the outside of his lead foot, which forced him to turn slightly to track her, which opened his right side for one clean half-second. She did not hit him. She simply put her hand, flat and soft, against his right ribs in that half-second, and then moved away. She was letting him know. Brick understood. He reset. He tried again, a different angle this time. Lena moved again, not the same way, something different, a step back and then forward at an angle that changed the whole shape of the space between them. His lead grab found nothing. She was not where she had been. She was somewhere else, still close, still calm, still looking at him with those flat, dark eyes. This went on for 90 seconds. Brick did not land a single clean touch. Lena touched him 4 more times, each time soft, each time on a different part of his body, each time saying, "I'm without words, I was here, and you didn't see me come." When Reed said stop, Brick stepped back and looked at Lena. His face had changed. The careful blankness was gone. In its place was something raw and honest. "What was that last footwork pattern?" he said, not challenging, actually asking. "Something my father showed me," Lena said. "He called it the river step. You move the way water moves around a stone." Brick looked at Torres. Torres looked at Dana. Dana was looking at Reed. But Reed was standing very still at the edge of the mat. He was staring at Lena with an expression nobody in the class had ever seen on his face before. It was not surprise exactly. It was something older and more complicated than surprise. It was the expression of a person who has seen something they thought they would never see again. He said nothing. The room was very quiet. Then his phone rang, breaking the silence, and Reed turned away to answer it. But Dana had seen his face before he turned. She had seen what was in it. She looked at Lena again with new eyes. Something about this small, quiet girl from the wrong class was not what it appeared to be. Dana did not yet know what it was. But she felt, with a certainty she could not explain, that they were all about to find out. 3 days passed before it happened. In those 3 days, Lena came to class at 7 and left at 9. She did every drill. She sparred with Dana, with Kim, and with a quiet man named Reyes, who had the fastest hands in the group and was deeply unhappy that he had not been able to touch Lena once in 8 minutes of live work. She said little and observed much. She answered questions when asked and did not offer information when not asked. Reed watched her every day. He was not obvious about it, but he was thorough. He made his corrections to the group in the morning and worked with individual students in the afternoon. But at least a portion of his attention, every hour, was on Lena Carter and the way she moved. He had not told anyone what he thought. Not yet. On the morning of the fourth day, two things happened. The first was that a new student arrived. His name was Garrett Cole. He was not a regular member of the Predator class. He was visiting from another facility in the north part of the city, a harder place. A place with a reputation for training fighters who competed at a professional level and did not always leave the mat walking straight. Cole was tall and broad and had the quiet, self-contained manner of someone who had won fights and knew it. He had been invited by Reed as an outside sparring partner, a way of testing the group against someone they had not seen before. Cole came in, shook Reed's hand, looked around the room, and then looked at Lena. His expression said the same thing everyone's had said on her first day. He looked away. The second thing that happened was that a man named Morris showed up. Morris was a senior member of the facility, not an instructor, but a sort of overseer, a person who checked in on classes from time to time and wrote reports about progress and performance. He sat down in a chair at the edge of the room with a notepad on his knee and a look that said he was here to be impressed or disappointed and was waiting to see which one. Reed started class. He ran through a warm-up shorter than usual because Cole was watching, and Reed was not the kind of man who made guests wait. He moved quickly to the demonstration portion of the morning, a new defense sequence he had been building the class toward for 2 weeks. And it involved 3 linked movements, a block, a redirect, and a takedown, that required precise timing and body awareness. He had been teaching the parts separately. Today he was going to show the full chain. He called Torres up to demonstrate. Torres came to the center. He and Reed had done this many times. Torres knew how to be a good demonstration partner. He attacked clearly at the right speed and made Reed's techniques visible. Reed talked through the first movement, block, and he showed it. Torres attacked, Reed blocked, clean. He talked through the second movement, redirect, he showed it. Torres attacked again. Reed redirected the force sideways, turning Torres's power away from him like a door swinging on a hinge. The class watched. Then Reed set up for the third movement, the takedown. It was the hardest part. It required the defender to use the redirected momentum to follow the attacker's movement all the way through and use it to bring them down. It was not about strength. It was about reading the exact moment when the attacker's weight was committed and using that commitment against them. Reed looked at the class. "Watch the hips," he said. "The hips tell you when the commitment is complete. You don't move until the hips commit. If you move too early, you're fighting their strength. If you move at the right moment, you're using their strength. You're not doing the work. They're doing the work for you." He looked at Torres. Torres nodded. Ready. Reed drew a breath and began. "When Torres attacks, I wait. I let him come. I block here. Then I redirect here. And then—" He stopped. He did not finish the sentence. He was looking at Lena. She was standing in the group, as she always stood, quiet and still, watching. But her hands had moved without her seeming to realize it. Her right hand had come up in a block position, and her left had shifted forward slightly. And her weight had transferred in a way that was unmistakably correct. Not just broadly correct, not sort of correct the way a person might look if they were trying to copy something, but exactly correct the way a person looks when they have done something 10,000 times and the body no longer needs the mind to run it. She was doing the movement before Reed demonstrated it. She had seen it coming from the setup. She had read the geometry of it from the position of Reed's feet and the angle of Torres's shoulders, and her body had answered automatically, without her even knowing she was doing it. Reed stopped mid-sentence. His mouth was still open slightly with the shape of the unfinished word. He stared. The room noticed he had stopped. Everyone turned to see what he was looking at. They saw Lena. They saw her hands. They saw the position. Lena noticed everyone looking. She became aware of what her hands were doing. She lowered them slowly. "Sorry," she said quietly. Reed did not respond right away. He was still looking at her with that expression, the one Dana had seen before, deep and old and hard to name. The room was completely silent. Morris had stopped writing on his notepad. Even Torres had forgotten he was standing in the middle of the mat. Reed walked toward Lena. He walked slowly, the way he always walked, the slight limp marking each step. And he stopped 2 feet in front of her. "Your father," he said. "What was his name?" Lena looked at him. Something changed in her face. Not a big change, just a small softening around the eyes, the kind that comes when something private is being asked about in a public place. "Carter," she said. "David Carter." The silence that followed was different from any silence that had come before in that room. It had weight to it, thickness. It pressed against the walls. Reed's jaw moved slightly, or like he was turning something over in his mouth. "I knew your father," he said. Lena was very still. "I know," she said. That stopped him again. He had not expected that. His eyes narrowed. "He told me about you," Lena said. "He said you were the only other person who ever gave him a real fight. He said you trained together for 2 years before you both went separate ways." Reed said nothing. "He talked about you sometimes," she said. "When I was learning the river step. Now, he said you almost figured it out once, but you moved a half-second too early." It was a quiet sentence, delivered without any edge, without any pride. Just a fact her father had told her, something she had carried for years without knowing she would ever say it out loud. Reed stood there for a long moment. Then he turned to the rest of the class. His face was composed again, steady. But his eyes were different. Something had come into them that had not been there before. "Change of plan," he said. "Carter will demonstrate the full sequence." Brick looked at Torres. Torres looked at Dana. Dana was watching Reed very carefully. Morris, at the edge of the room, had put his pen down completely. Lena looked at Reed. She did not say anything. He held out his hand in the direction of the center mat. She walked to it, and the room, without anyone deciding to, leaned forward. She stood in the center of the mat and looked at Reed. He looked back at her. Then he turned to the class and said, "Cole." Garrett Cole, the visiting fighter from the North facility, looked up from where he was standing near the back. He had been watching everything with the calm, measuring look of someone who is experienced enough to be patient. He had been waiting to spar since he arrived. He had assumed he would be paired with Torres or Brick. He walked to the mat. He was taller than Lena by 10 inches and heavier by 60 pounds. His arms were long. His footwork, as he settled into position, was quiet and precise. He had the relaxed readiness of someone who had been in this situation many times and always been the most dangerous person on the mat. He looked at Lena. She looked at him. He waited for Reed to give the signal. Reed held up his hand. The room went still, not just quiet, but deeply still, the way a crowd goes still at the moment before something that cannot be undone. "Full sequence," Reed said. "Cole attacks at real speed. Carter defends." Cole raised an eyebrow. He looked at Reed, then back at Lena, then at Reed again. The question on his face was clear. Reed's expression answered it. Cole took a short breath through his nose, adjusted his stance, and decided that whatever this was, he would be honest. He attacked at real speed. He came in fast with a sharp grab at Lena's shoulder, the kind of grab that was a setup, a way of committing her to a position before the real attack followed. It was smooth and quick and very practiced. Lena was not in front of it when it arrived. She had moved the same instant he moved, not in anticipation exactly, not guessing, but reading. She had read the compression in his knee, the lift of his shoulder, the slight forward lean that always, in every fighter, comes 1/5 of a second before the body commits. She had moved sideways into the small space that opened when his weight started forward. Her left arm rose, not blocking hard, but guiding, redirecting his arm's energy past her rather than fighting it. Then her weight shifted. Her right hand came forward in a press against his redirected forearm. His momentum, which had been aimed at her, now had nowhere to go except further forward and slightly down. His own power was now working against his balance. She stepped in. Her hip came against his hip. Not a crash, a placement. Quiet and exact. Cole went down. And he went down in a controlled way because he was skilled enough to roll and land without hurting himself, but he went down fully, all the way to the mat, in one clean movement that was over before anyone watching could fully explain how it had happened. The room did not make a sound for a full 3 seconds. Cole lay on the mat for a moment, then pushed himself up to one elbow. He looked up at Lena. She was standing above him in the same position she had held before the whole thing began. And her breathing was not even noticeably different. Cole sat up fully. He looked at her for a long time. "Again," he said. And they went again. And again. 4 times in total. Each time Cole tried something different. A lower angle, a faster entry, a feint before the real move. Each time, Lena adjusted. Not the same response each time, a different response each time, fitted exactly to what he gave her, the way water fits exactly to every shape it moves through. On the 4th round, Cole tried something that had worked on nearly every person he had ever trained with. He faked the grab and went low, driving toward her legs. It was a real attempt. He was not showing it to her. He was trying it. Lena stepped over it. Not backward, over it, forward, and to the side, and the moment his head passed beneath her, she brought her hand down in a flat palm against the back of his shoulder, in the motion of a redirect that turned his low drive into a spiral. And Cole turned with it and came to rest on the mat again, this time face up, looking at the ceiling. He started laughing. It was not a polite laugh or an embarrassed laugh. It was a real laugh, the kind that comes when something happens that is simply too good not to appreciate. He stood up. He looked at Reed. "Where has she been?" he said. Reed said nothing. He was watching Lena. Lena was looking at her own hands. She had gone somewhere quiet in herself. And something in the exercise had brought something up. It was in her face, not grief exactly, but the feeling that comes when you do something your loved one taught you and they are not there to see it. Dana moved from the edge of the mat and stood next to her. She did not say anything. She just stood close, the way a person stands close to someone who needs company, but not words. After a moment, Lena looked up. Reed had walked to the far side of the mat. He stood with his back to the group, and his hands were clasped behind him, and for a long time he did not move. When he finally turned around, his face was the same as always, composed, steady. But something in the set of his shoulders was different, softer maybe. He looked at Lena. "Your father was the best natural fighter I ever trained with," he said. It was not a loud statement. It was the kind of thing a person says when they have been holding it for a long time and have finally decided to let it out. I learned things from him that I never learned from any master. Things that couldn't be written in a manual or taught in a class. Things that only come from someone who understands the form from the inside." He paused. "He clearly taught them to you." Lena said nothing. Her jaw was tight for a moment. Then it released. "He said you were worth teaching too," she said. "He said he always thought he would come back and finish what you started. He just ran out of time." Reed was still for a long moment. Then he looked down at the mat and then back up again. "How long ago did you lose him?" he asked. 2 years, she said. "That's when I started training alone." 2 years alone, training in whatever space she had with no partner, no instructor, no one to push back against. Just the techniques her father had given her and the discipline to keep doing them until they became her. Brick, who had not spoken in some time, I said quietly to Torres, "She trained for 2 years alone and she still moves like that?" Torres said nothing. He was thinking about the river step, about the way she had moved around him that first day, sideways and forward and impossibly placed, like she was not in a fight, but in a conversation, reading every word before it was spoken. Morris, the facility overseer, had stood up from his chair at some point during the sparring. He was still standing. His notepad was closed. Then he was looking at Reed with an expression that asked a clear question without words. Reed looked at the room. Then he looked at Lena. "The paperwork mistake stays," he said. "This is your class." He said it simply and finely, the way he said everything, without decoration or build-up. Then he turned to the rest of the group. "Tomorrow we work the sequence, all of you. Carter will assist with instruction." He picked up his clipboard and walked toward the door. Nobody moved right away, and the room held the weight of what had just happened, the way a room holds heat after a fire, present and real even after the visible part was over. Cole looked at Lena one more time. "What do you call that movement? The one with the step?" "The river step," she said. He turned it over in his mind, nodded slowly. "Your father name it?" "Yes." Cole pulled on his jacket. "Good name," he said. He walked out. Dana looked at Lena. "Are you okay?" she asked. Lena thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything. Then she said, "I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Outside, the gray morning had started to thin. A little pale light was pressing through the high windows of the training center, falling in long, flat lines across the blue mat, across the place where Lena had stood, across the place where Garrett Cole had laughed at the ceiling. Lena picked up her bag. She would be back tomorrow. She would help teach the sequence her father had passed to her the way he had received it. Quietly, patiently, without ego, with only the honest wish that it continue past the hands that first shaped it, moving forward like water, like a river, like something that does not stop just because one stone has gone. She walked out into the light.